My name is Keith. I'm from KM Archery. Jack is on his adventure crossing the country, and he's decided to stop by and visit with me. He is quite fascinated by something that I have in my collection. Now, this
Steel bow.
is a folding steel bow.
Do you mind bringing it a little higher?
Yeah, it's from the 1950s. This belonged to clubmates of mine who shot pole archery here in Winnipeg. They bought a whole bunch of these kits, and they imported them from a supplier in Belgium. We actually don't know the manufacturer of this. We've been trying to figure out the manufacturer for the longest time. The majority of people who use these bows have since passed away, including actually the gentleman who owned this bow. He recently passed away, as in literally just the other day from when we're speaking, from the day that we're recording this. It is, as you can see, a takedown, and it's a takedown hollow bow. So you can actually see a seam. These, ironically, the stuff that the research that I've done on these bows, what little there is, these bows like this were actually given to commandos during the Second World War. Didn't last very long, and it didn't get very much use, but they were given to commandos.
For military or for...
Yeah, the British commandos used these things. Now, did they actually use them in combat? There is absolutely no proof that they ever did it. Would this be a good idea to use in combat? Probably not. No. And Mad Jack Churchill, when he was the last person to go into combat with a longbow, yeah, he was using a proper longbow, an actual war bow, not one of these. These bows have a couple of different knocking points, so you actually have two different weights. I just string it to here, so for me it's 54 at 28. My draw is 26, so it's about 47 pounds. We get a speed of about 130 feet per second out of it, and interestingly enough, it uses a steel cable. Now you have to ignore the homemade servings, but it uses a steel cable as a string. You do not want to get an archer's kiss with this bow. It hurts.
Good thing it has those paddings, though.
Now, I have shot this bow, and I don't shoot it very often, mostly because it is old, and the reputation of these bows is that they fold and fail. Now, has this one failed? No. Do I want to take a chance of this one failing? Definitely no. Mostly because I wanted to have it in my collection. There are, if you go through this, if you do some searches, you will find a couple different manufacturers. There was a British one, and then there was a Swedish manufacturer. Now, once again, nobody seems to remember or know where this came from, only that it was imported from Belgium back in 49, if I remember correctly.
1949.
Yeah, 1949. Wow. There are no obvious maker marks on it to tell us what it is. But it is a cool device, and it is a piece of manufacturing history. It's also a piece of archery history, and for me, it's a part of pole archery history here in Winnipeg. We shoot a different type of sport called pole archery. Most of you out there will think pop and jay or pop and go. In Belgium, it's called stand weep. We call it pole archery. It's our colloquialism for it, and it's a sport that's been practiced here in Manitoba 100 years, over 100 years actually. It's been organized with a club system since 1925. So we're actually closing in on 100 years of actual continuously shooting clubs. You don't find a lot of that. I mean, this is Manitoba. This is Canada. It's not common. And this is part of the history, and this belonged to people that I know or knew and have met. And this is something I'm able to kind of think about the people that I've met who have shot before me, who take a great deal of pride in their shooting, by the way. Last year when he was visiting, after about an hour of us shooting at the King Shoot, he said, we would have had this off already and been to the pub and drinking already. And it might have been true, but it's what it is. So that's a steel bow. one of the things that is kind of interesting, as I mentioned, it is a takedown bow, and it's hollow, which we've spoken of. And unlike, there are like crossbow prods, and there's Mughal, what are so-called Mughal crab bows out of India that were solid. Now, the crab bows would have been, what, 17th century, give or take, and the steel prods would have been 15th century, give or take. But this essentially is rolled steel, right? And I don't know if you can see. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you get about 12 grains per pound. You're getting, give or take, at my draw of only 26, you're getting about 130 feet per second out of it, which is comparable to a wood bow, comparable to a fiberglass bow. A fiberglass bow will last a lot longer. There are, like, for example, I guess a common fiberglass bow to compare it to, and for within a similar timeline, would be the jet bow. That was an all fiberglass bow, introduced early on as a beginner's bow, or just an inexpensive bow that was sold widely back in the 1960s. I don't think I have any examples of that anymore. I did, but I don't think I kept them. I do have an example of a Ben Pearson wood bow. It's a flat bow, but I have an example of one of those from 1955, actually, which would be a contemporary of this one. So back when these were being made, from the 1930s till early 50s, these were considered premier bows.
So it's interesting that this falls right before the widespread adoption of fiberglass, right in the late 50s. And another thing to note is that because they're hollow, their performance is better than a solid steel bow.
Yeah, you'd have a lot more spring to that.
So,
but there's also a little bit more risk for failure.
Exactly. So the hollowness allows it to perform better than a solid steel bow, and a lot lighter for the gentleman to shoot. But at the same time, it is more risky if it fails. A solid steel bow of this dimension is a lot safer to shoot. Although
it won't fail, but it also it will lose its temper, and it'll lose its rebound spring.
And it's a lot slower in performance.
Yeah. The tips aren't going to move as fast. And as you can see, while this is a long bow, it is curved. There's a reflex to it.
Yeah, it's a reflex longbow.
So that speeds up your tips to give you your speed. And like I said, you can actually string it in two different positions to get two different draw weights. I always go here. I have strung this. I have shot this. I do not do it on a regular basis. This thing's older than I am.
Well, thank you so much for this video. It's interesting to see hollow steel bows in the 20th century. They're very rare today. Thank you very much for the video.